Those of you who are interested in astrology are doing it because you're interested in figuring out more about yourselves. And, astrology has been around for thousands of years, like 5,500, almost 6,000 years from what they estimate. And the world of psychology has only been around for about 170, 180 years. And so, how do we weave these together? How do we weave this understanding of who we are as souls with mental health? And this is one of the reasons I'm doing this video for you today, because astrology can actually help you really understand yourself from not only a personal perspective, but also an emotional perspective. And I'm just going to throw out a few things to think about. So there's an astrological personality, which is basically how the planets aligned when you were born and how this creates kind of this system of things you're supposed to learn. So in other words, our life lessons, the dynamics that we are built in with, some of the personality characteristics, all of those things that really make us who we are, which is why we are interested in astrology. Now, certain countries and certain cultures follow astrology from the day they're born. Some match marriages from astrology. Some use this for choosing business partners and all kinds of different things. And so, how is this valid? How is this helpful? Well, the more you learn about astrology, you realize it's not just the horoscope in the paper. It's not just something that is kind of fluff, because when you start to understand all the dynamics of an astrological chart, it's fascinating how much can be flushed out. And so, as a psychologist, as someone who has done mental health work for 38 years, and someone who's been doing soul work for probably 25, 30 of those years, in one way or another, I'm learning more and more about astrology, and I'm using this as I teach in my Soul Health Scholars program to help people understand those that they work with a little bit better so that they can help move them along. So let me just give you a couple suggestions for how to dive into this a little bit more. So if you have an emotional kind of concern, so you tend to be a worrier, well, there are certain configurations in a person's astrological chart that kind of make you susceptible to ruminating or to worrying, to putting yourself through a whole lot. So people who let me use the idea of maybe a Capricorn. Capricorns sometimes get stuck in worry. They're overthinking things. They're getting very stuck in trying to make things fit into a rubric that they can understand, or sometimes they have a difficult time changing, and so that can make quite a bit of a difference in how someone copes as well. If you were a Pisces, Pisces are the most sensitive of all of the zodiac. And so they could be much more sensitive to someone else's emotions. They could be major empaths. They could be set up in a way that, wow, they're taking on everything that's going on around them. And it's not unusual for a Pisces to get very absorbed in not only their immediate environment, but what's going on in the world. So they take on the emotions of the situation. There are also aspects in a chart that you can have opposing parts of your chart so that it can create this internal conflict. It can create lack of confidence. It can create ways to, gosh, that you're wrestling with yourself. And so you might just think it's a self-esteem thing, but it's actually part of your astrological chart, which to me means it's something to evolve beyond. And I'm going to explain that in a second here. If you are the least bit interested or aware of astrology, you also know that there are 12 houses. As you go through each and every one of those 12 houses, and really what the house is, it's basically a slice of the pie around a circle, and each one of those slices designates a kind of an outlook or kind of a lesson that we might be learning or an aspect of who we are within each one of those pieces that makes us the whole of who we are. Now, if you are heavily weighted in one of those aspects, it might be that you have a lot more karmic work to do, which means, let's say, for instance, okay, so we're going to put the sixth house, considering the sixth house. If you imagine a piece of the pie and the sixth piece of the pie is in Virgo. Virgos are about service. Virgos are serve, 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 and they are high achievers and they are high. They work hard. Let me rephrase what I just said. They're hard workers, but basically it's for the sake of service. Capricorns, almost on the opposite end of the chart, are they are hard workers too, but it's because of achievement. So you can have similar personalities within that chart. Both of them can be workaholics, but for very different reasons. One can be for serving, one can be for achieving. If, for instance, you have someone who is a Leo, and Leos like to shine, they like some attention, they like to kind of be the center of attention. And yet, if there's something else in their chart that's holding them back or restricting them from shining their light in one way or another, that can cause discomfort as well. So, there's so many different ways that we can use astrology to help a person understand their mental health or their confidence or their just overall well-being. Now, what's interesting too is that astrology has been set up for years to help you understand relationships as well. So, not only parental relationships, but sibling relationships or relationships with community, relationships basically with the world at large, relationships with kind of what your vocation is supposed to be and how you are supposed to share it. Now, I am a Sag. I am a triple Sag just in the first six houses of my astrological chart. And I have another Sag further on down the line. So I have four Sages in my chart. And Sages are known to be outspoken. They speak directly. We are adventurers. We really like creativity. We really like learning. We love kind of learning the expansive kinds of things that are going on in the world. We like to put puzzles together. But Sages also, we have our own stuff where basically we have a difficult time slowing down for people. We have a hard time wanting to be held back, so a lot of things can get in our way that if anything is making me feel like something's holding me back, it's going to make me emotionally uncomfortable. Um, I could go through each one of those signs of the zodiac and help you understand that there's something that could be affecting us from a mental health concern. Now, here's the other thing. I'm a psychologist. I've been doing this work for a long time. I see mental health a lot differently than most psychologists because I look at it from a soul perspective. So, for instance, someone who is susceptible to depression from a biological perspective, that's one thing. But someone who has depression because of the things that have been going on in their life, I call that suppression of the soul. Now, I can look, I'm not an astrologer, but I'm getting better at this and I'm learning more about this. Um, but I can look at an astrological chart and I can say, I bet this person has some suppression of the soul. So, in other words, some situational depression with whether it's from relationships, whether it's career, maybe they're not aligned with their highest being. In other words, what they're supposed to be doing. Maybe there are health problems, but you can see a lot of this in an astrological chart and apply it to how a person feels emotionally. Now, astrology doesn't explain everything, and it's also not a perfect kind of science. And what I mean by that is that there's so many different dynamics that happen in an astrological chart that you might have a psychologist that should be perfectly aligned with what they're doing. Now, actually, my chart, from what I'm told, is like I couldn't be better matched astrologically with what I do than what I do. I mean, really, astrologers have told me we've never met anybody who is matched better to do what they do from a career perspective than what your chart says. But you can have a psychologist that maybe is not quite as matched up and they're not as happy in their work. You can have and I'm going to go to a Sag, you can have a Sag that doesn't fit all of the Sag characteristics. And part of that is because we have to look at the entire chart, not just the initial, what's called a sun sign, the horoscope sign, basically. You have to look at all of it to understand a person. And so if you have someone that doesn't quite match, that's probably why. But kind of getting back to this point of mental health and astrology, I wish I knew. I wish I had an astrology class as part of my psychological training, to tell you the truth, because honestly, the more I learn about it, the more I learn about the soul, the more I integrate so many different aspects into the soul work that I do and the spiritual work that I do with clients. I wish I had this information because it explains so much. Again, it doesn't explain everything because there are so many different contexts to this. But for those of you who are interested in astrology, I would look at your charts as helping you understand your mental health and your emotional health just as much as those life lessons that you're trying to get through. If you are a therapist or a coach, I would definitely maybe look into understanding astrology a little bit more, because if you have a client that is stuck or a client that keeps going through the same life lesson over and over again, I'm going to bet that you're going to find something in their astrology chart that explains it to some extent. And what's interesting is you can even interpret a little bit more about your upbringing, your parenting. Okay, so if these certain configurations in an astrological chart are there, it probably means you had some challenges in childhood, and some child, it could be directly with a parent, it could be with the circumstances that you had. There's just so much that you can learn from astrology. And this is why I'm incorporating it into level 2 of my Soul Health Scholars certifications for coaches and practitioners, is to help them understand that there's more to the soul than what most people know. And so if you're interested in that, you can go to my website and look under the Soul Health Scholars tab, and there's going to be a lot more information coming on that. I'm reformatting a lot of those classes to make them a little bit easier for people to schedule into their day. But the whole point of this is take a look at astrology. It's fascinating. I go back to the very first full astrological chart that I ever had done. It was probably about 23, 24 years ago. And it was amazing to me to watch the person, the astrologer, just kind of lay out so much about me without knowing me personally. It was just fascinating to just read the chart. But this is why I want to emphasize that astrology could help you. And, if you have an astrologer that you've been going to, but they don't understand mental health, they may not be able to help you interpret it in that way. But this is why I think mental health practitioners need to start considering looking into astrology to help people cope and help people heal from their challenges. Because in order to evolve beyond their challenges, and I'm going to go back and talk about that in a second, in order for them to evolve beyond, sometimes they have to understand the life lessons behind it. So let me go through this and talk about the evolving beyond. Now, I talk about the fact that I don't feel like it's enough to help someone heal. I want to help them evolve beyond where they started. Because if we just get you back to baseline, yeah, that's going to be great. And yet we could get you further, helping you integrate some conscious evolution into your healing process. In other words, helping you understand consciously what happened to get you there so that you can evolve beyond it. In other words, learn how to release old patterns, learn how to move beyond those old patterns. That's the evolutionary part of this. Here's the deal. Most astrologers don't tell you, or maybe don't even think to tell you, that your astrology is different from lifetime to lifetime. So to me, when I look at an astrological chart, or when I encourage someone to think about their chart, I encourage them to think about it in terms of, it starts at birth, the time, the date, and the place that you were born. But really, what we're supposed to do is evolve beyond the challenges that are laid out in that astrological map in order for us to grow into our next lifetime, whatever that might be. So think about that. Our astrological chart is kind of a roadmap in some ways of what we're supposed to evolve beyond, what we're supposed to heal, what we're supposed to overcome. And a lot of these emotional concerns that I just laid out are part of our soul's path. And so astrology can help you understand, oh my gosh, well, yes, this is exactly how this happened. This is when this happened. Astrologers can lay out a timeline for when you have key events in your life. They may not be able to tell you what those events exactly are, but they could kind of tell you what some of the elements of what they are, and how you might have been struggling, or how you might have wrestled with those kinds of things. They can lay out when health problems are a likelihood. They can lay out in your timeline when relationship issues are a problem, or career problems. So it's one of those things where there's so many ways that astrology can be used to help a person. But again, you need a very skilled astrologer and you need a semi-skilled therapist to help you understand how to bring it all together. Now, again, when I'm going to be teaching the level 2 of the Soul Health Scholars Program, I am not an astrologer, but I do understand the astrological personality. I can look at that personality and kind of lay out a rough outline of what that person has dealt with over their lifetime. Now, I'm learning more about astrology from more of a technical perspective, and that's how I can really help people understand this even more. But this is what's so important for people to know is that astrology and mental health go hand in hand. We just have to reconnect it. So, I'd love to hear your questions. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your experiences. So make a comment on, from this video and let me know what else you want to know about the soul. Have a wonderful day and go think about this a little bit more.